what is going on? 8-Bit Bulldog here, and this is going to be my full review on the Nintendo Labo VR kit, and the 5 main Toy-Cons that come with it. So, let's start with the VR headset itself. So here is the main VR headset. It is relatively small and it has a plastic piece in the front where the lenses are. And if you're wondering what this is known as the safety cap. So when you do not have Joy-Cons on your Switch, you put that in and it ensures that it will not fall out, along with the foam inside of it that prevents it from sliding around anyway. Now, there's nothing particularly special about the headset itself, but this is what allows the other Toy-Cons to work. For this is the only headset. This is placed inside of the other Toy-Cons with the Switch inside for it to work. Now, according to the game, it says that the headset takes around 30 to 60 minutes to create. Now on to the next Toy-Con, the VR camera. So the way this works is once you place your Switch in here, you put the left Joy-Con in here as a means to take the pictures, and the right Joy-Con sensor facing out in here so it can tell when you're rotating it. Now, the way this works is that when it notices the rotation, it'll zoom in and zoom out like you would expect a camera to. Nothing too special. It's a little bit smaller than the VR headset itself, but still pretty interesting. In the game, it says that the Ocean camera takes around 30 to 60 minutes to create. Now, this has 2 games with it. The first one, Ocean camera, is where you are underwater and you're able to take pictures of whatever is living down there. And after every 3 pictures you take, you'll be sent to this gallery. If you complete an objective by taking a picture of a certain thing or certain sets of things, it will be added to the collection and you will be able to see it in the large gallery that is in front of you. Then you can go back and take even more pictures, but every 3 pictures you will have to go and see these pictures yourself, which can be a little bit annoying. The next game is House Camera. I believe this is related to a game that's in the first Labo kit. What you can see is this small room containing this weird fluff ball animal, and there's 4 spots around the room that if you look at will make certain things happen. It's in the similar vein of the Ocean camera, in which you take 3 pictures at a time and then you proceed on to complete objectives by taking pictures of certain actions or events that take place. The next Toy-Con is the elephant. So the way it works is after the VR headset is placed inside of it, you put your left Joy-Con in the initial part of the trunk, and at the end of the trunk you put your right Joy-Con. And from that point on, you can stretch it out and do things like drawing. Now, if you're wondering what the white stickers are for, those are actually reflective. The IR sensor sends out light rays and it can detect how far something is from how bright it is. And what it uses is the reflection of the stickers to keep track of its location. While it is limited, if it does go out of the range, it will notify you subtly with an in-game mechanic. It will not lose its tracking, but it will remain it very accurately. So according to the game, it will take 60 to 120 minutes to create the elephant. So one of the games with the elephant is Doodle. Well, it's what you'd expect. You can draw in 3D space, and there's even a 2-player minigame in which you can draw something and you pass it off to the next person for them to guess what you drew, vice versa. And the other game is called Marble Run. It's where you are in a 3D space and there's this track that you have to try to get the marble from the start to the end by manipulating parts of the track. This one I found to be personally extremely fun and really satisfying. The next Toy-Con is the Toy-Con Bird. Now, as absurd as this one is quite fascinating. So after you put the VR headset in the top here, you don't use the right Joy-Con, but you use the left one in here. And the way it works is you get your hands in the grip and you pull down. When you do this, it will flap the wings of the bird and you can fly around in VR by looking left and right with tilting. Now, according to the game, the bird takes around 90 to 150 minutes to create. There are 2 games with the Bird Toy-Con. Bird, in which you fly around and you hatch eggs and feed them so that they can grow into larger birds. And Bird Dash, which involves the wind pedal, which will not be featured in this video. Bird Dash is where you race and go through rings to get the best time possible. Now on to the next Toy-Con, the Blaster. And like you'd expect, it's a gun. After placing the VR headset in here, the left Toy-Con goes in here, and the right Toy-Con goes at the end of the barrel, but the IR sensor is facing inwards. And the way it works is you can cock this back, and it will lock this piece in place. And after you lock it in place, the sensor will be able to detect the distance and when you pull the trigger. And that's not the only thing. If you rotate this, it will go into a freeze time mode in which you can destroy multiple targets at once when you flip it back. So according to the game, the blaster will take 120 to 180 minutes to create. There are 2 games with the Toy-Con blaster. Blaster, in which you have 6 levels and you can travel throughout the city defeating aliens and mini-bosses as they appear. And the next one is Kablasta, in which it is a pass-and-play 2-player Hungry Hungry Hippos style game. Now here's where I'm going to give discrete detail and my opinion on all of the Toy-Cons, starting with the VR headset. So the thing is about this, was kind of surprised as to how well it worked. I of course have never used true VR. This is my first time using true VR, but there is a fundamental flaw. The thing is, if you know anything about the specs of the Switch, you would know that it plays 1080p, pretty standard for a console. But when it's in its handheld form, it plays at 720p. So when you're holding it up to your head, you're seeing all the little pixels because the convex lens is magnifying it. This you do get over after a while, but at first kind of bugs your eyes and it kind of looks like a CRT TV or cathode ray tube. And honestly, there's not a terrible amount of things to do with this other than mini games in the VR Plaza, which I will get to later. So for the most part, since this is the core aspect of everything and it works surprisingly well for what the Switch is able to do, I'm going to give this a 7.5 out of 10. As for the ocean camera, I found it to be a really interesting and calming experience. Even though there's not much to do, it's kind of interesting to just take photos in a VR style sense, especially because a lot of games are like, oh, take pictures in a safari. What I like is that rather than it being on land, it's in the ocean. It's a different take on photography VR games, and I really like what they did with it. But there's not much to do and not much replay value. It takes a lot of time and you don't really get too much out of it. So my final rating for the ocean camera is 5 out of 10. Now for the elephant. Oh boy. The elephant surprised me. I honestly thought it was just going to be this really weird game where you can kinda doodle, but it ended up blowing my mind. The tracking is surprisingly amazing and I haven't had any issues with it whatsoever. Especially in Marble Run where everything has to be really specific for it to even work properly. I like the idea where it uses the stickers to keep track when it's in a standalone position. However, it does get really tiring to hold it out after a while, and even though the rubber bands give it more of a free movement, it is still restricted and I don't really like the feeling of that, but small close things that are right in front of you, they do feel really loose and free and I do like that. So my final rating for the elephant will have to be 9 out of 10. So now on to the Toy-Con bird. Now, honestly, I didn't think I would actually like it, but I ended up loving it. The way the game works is that, you have this vast island to travel through. It ended up being much larger than I thought it would be considering the hardware limitations of the Switch and how the VR actually works. It's very tasking of any sort of hardware to do VR, in most cases. And the objective is to collect 25 eggs. Once you go to these eggs, they'll hatch and you'll have a chick. And you have to feed it with whatever it specifies and how much it wants. And then once you feed this bird with what it needs, it will become an adult form, I guess you can say, and it will follow you around, which I must say is kind of a surreal and humbling experience when it feels like you're making progress, unlike the other games where it's like a play once and yeah, you had your fun, but I feel like I actually made progress with this, which oftentimes you don't really see in VR. It's like a play once, have your fun experience. So in my opinion, the bird is amazing in that factor. And it feels really crazy when you're flying around with this. I got dizzy multiple times and almost fell over. Even while in a chair, I almost fell out of the chair. And then once you get 24 birds, there's this one giant golden egg at the top of the mountain. Once you go up to it, it will summon the legendary chick. And it is massive. Once you give it 20 of every type of food in the game, then it'll become this large massive form, in which you can see it flying around and you really feel accomplished from this. What I think is most fascinating about it is that once you fly near the adult form of the legendary chick, or as it's known as the legendary bird, the sky becomes night. It's all dark, and it's really interesting to see what you've been playing through this whole time in a more calm, dark sense. There really is a sense of accomplishment when you play the bird game. So just because of that, minus all the dizziness and all that, I'm going to give this a 9.5 out of 10. Now, on to the blaster, which kind of disappointed me a little bit, but not a terrible amount. So the blaster, which I'm surprised it actually works the way it does. So there's multiple stickers on multiple parts throughout the barrel so that the Joy-Con did detect a lot of things about it, especially when you pull the trigger. And it was a really interesting experience. It kind of felt like a theme park ride, one of those really slow ones where you're shooting at all of the targets with your infrared gun. But it felt more responsive. It felt satisfying when you shot the gun, because not only this shook from the part getting flung back by rubber bands, but also there was slight HD rumbles, so you can feel the response from what you're doing, which I absolutely loved. The only thing is, there's not too much to do other than shooting enemies in the blaster game, and there's only 6 levels, 3 of them having bosses. It feels like there's a wasted opportunity, and I kind of dislike that, especially for how much work it took to make this thing. Now, for the Hungry Hungry Hippos game, I haven't played a lot of it, but I don't really like it. It's not intuitive, and it doesn't necessarily make it clear what you're supposed to do. I know what you're supposed to do, like I said, it's like Hungry Hungry Hippos in a sense, but it just feels off. It doesn't feel right, and it is pass and play, so it is kind of annoying. So pass and play with the VR headset, I don't necessarily like. For some reason, I thought it was going to be wireless and 2 people were going to connect. I'm not totally sure why I thought this, but it's a thing, I guess. Now on to the VR Plaza, which is just a bunch of small mini games that you can play with the VR headset or many of the other Toy-Cons that you can create with the kit. So I'm going to go through some games that I thought were noteworthy because I found them pretty fun. So on the first page, it's just pretty boring, some basic stuff, but there was 2 games in particular, Zero Gravity and Kitchen Capers. So Zero Gravity, you're in this room surrounded by random junk. You can control time and gravity, and it is really interesting to mess with the physics. Along with your right Joy-Con, you can use to grab and move stuff around, which even though the elephant does a better job at this, it feels like you have more freedom because unlike the elephant where you're restricted to being in front of you, you have full control. You can do a 360 spin if you want, and it is really interesting. Kitchen Capers is in the same vein, however it takes place in a kitchen and there's all this, things that you would see in a kitchen, and even though it's smaller and there's less things to do, it's kind of interesting the attention to detail that actually went into Kitchen Caper. Now on to page 2, it just contains games that you would use the Toy-Cons with. Nothing too particularly special. On the third page, it has some more of that, but it transitions back to other games. Now it's just more fun games, nothing too terribly crazy. There's even a game where you have a racket and you have to try to bounce the ball on it 100 times. I haven't been able to do that. It's not hard to do, it's just after a while it gets straining and you start panicking a little bit because if you lose it all, you just wasted your time. There's even this game called Psychic Powers where you have this small reticle in the center of your screen, and if you look at something, objects around you will just start floating and messing around. There's nothing too particularly crazy about it, but it's just kind of funny the first time you play it. And there's a pinball game. And it's kind of interesting because the VR doesn't really have to do with it too terribly much, but you could just see a full view of this pinball machine, and yeah, it kind of has assets from the rest of the Toy-Con games, which I thought was kind of interesting. You can make different things happen when the pinball itself actually hits different parts of the map. There's explosions, camera flashes, aliens, and all that. It's kind of funny. There's not really too much to it, but pinball machine in VR. The big old book. I'm not going to say anything about it because I actually want you guys to experience it for yourself. If you get the VR kit, play the big old book. It's on page 4. Do it. Thank me later. And there's also this game where you have a bunch of instruments around you. Again, there's no objective and it's not particularly interesting, but it is kind of funny to just start whacking instruments and not having to worry about breaking them. And that's pretty much everything that was noteworthy within the VR Plaza. And yeah, so overall, I honestly really enjoyed this. Like, I was kind of surprised at how much I enjoyed this, because honestly, I'm a person that's like, I like spatial puzzle solving, things like creating stuff like this, creating things that have no form but can just become this amalgamation that is amazing afterwards. And I really like stuff like that. There is some fundamental flaws about it though, as in a lot of cases, your camera is stuck in one position and there's no asynchronous warping, so it can, well, as far as I know, there's no asynchronous warping, so it gets really strange and it kind of feels distorting at times. But for the most part, it is really good tracking, and I like how the Toy-Cons have everything very specific so that small little interactions are picked up and inputted through the game. And it almost feels like your imagination. Like, that sounds cheesy, I know. But kind of like with the bird. Like, just imagine you just see this. Imagine, like, you created this, like, on your own. You're like, oh, I'm gonna ride the bird. So you put it up here and you go around your house pretending like, oh, I'm flying on a bird. But it kind of is a surreal and kind of, like, sensationalistic experience when you put it up to your head, and rather than just seeing the bird and it looks like you're riding it, you're experiencing something that you could only imagine seeing. So that's kind of something that I find extremely interesting about the VR Toy-Cons. Now here's the thing, the price is pretty steep for this, and honestly, everyone gives it flack as like, oh, it's cardboard, oh, it's this and that. I'm trying to be optimistic about it, and I'm trying to give an objective review based on the gameplay. The cardboard itself, honestly, has been much better cardboard than just a standard cardboard box that you would get from like Amazon or something. It is really firm cardboard, and I feel like people don't really give credit to that, because yes, it is cardboard, it is kind of a lazy idea, but at least it's not crappy cardboard. Because at that point, it would just be a waste of money. You're just going to be dealing with this piece of crap that's going to wear down in a couple weeks. I've been using these for a long time. I haven't had any of them wear down, and they all function perfectly fine. So yeah, that is going to be my overall review. I am going to have a spreadsheet on screen containing my ratings for my first impression reviews and my final reviews. And that will be on the screen after I give my outro. So yeah, that is going to be all for the VR kit. There are some things I left out, such as Mario Odyssey and Legend of Zelda being ported to work with the VR headset, along with there's 3 extra Toy-Cons I didn't bring up: the glasses, the pinwheel, and the wind pedal. Thing is, those aren't part of the main kit. That's not what Nintendo really advertises it for. But if you guys want to see a bonus video of me covering those things, let me know by getting this video to 10 likes. I know, it's an amazing feat, isn't it? So yeah, if we can get this video to 10 likes, I'll create that bonus video, and yeah, bye.